This is the executive director. That's the board. As I mentioned earlier, we've done a good deal of research over the years with organizations that have gone through the institutes, and we've looked at ones that are highly successful and then looked at the traits that are common to those highly successful organizations. And this is a kind of a chart that illustrates what the key pieces of the puzzle are. And those organizations that have a committed board, a growing constituency of individual donors, and a strategic plan are the ones that tend to float up to the top as the cream. And then in descending order of importance, programs, annual donor campaign, capable staff, and an executive director are those key pieces. So as you look to think about growing your organization, certainly the three areas that you want to spend the most time focusing on are growing your constituency, building your board, and getting their commitment up to a higher level, and then obviously operating to a strategic plan without ignoring those other factors, obviously.
What are E&D, education and development, or what?
Executive director.
Executive, ED is executive director. CEO, chief executive, I don't, they're referred to as different things. And
you can say that's the most important?
No, the most important are these three on the outside of the pyramid.
So just to clarify, you're saying you could have an organization with a great executive director, but they don't have the plan, the board, and maybe they have a great director and a great constituency, but the plan and the board are kind of not so solid.
No,
you're not going to be that great.
What we did, we looked at financial success. Financial stability is the key.
Okay.
Because if you're not financially stable, you can't grow your programs, you can't reach more people, so on and so forth. And of those organizations that we surveyed, 480 some at random, what we found were that the most important elements to sustainability were those three areas, and then as a lesser point those along the way. And we'll show you the results of some other research here going forward that, this is the kind of stuff that leads us to what we want to emphasize when we do these institutes, because we want to kind of let everybody know what the success factors are and what you should be chasing. And most people, if we had a discussion with you without having this chart up here, would say, and if I asked the question, what are the most important elements of your business, you'd probably say your programs. Most people would answer that, but then when we take those answers and we lay them against success, real success, what we find is that these are the key factors. Thought it might also be helpful to share with you what grant makers and funders are using these days to evaluate organizations. And certainly the most common thing that comes up is, does every member of your board contribute financially to the organization? And the reason they do that is very simple, that there are 1,485,000 nonprofit organizations in the United States. Anybody here really good at math? There are 300 million people in the United States total, men, women, and children. If you divide 1,485,000 into 300 million, what do you get? 259, in round numbers, people to support every nonprofit. There's a huge amount of competition out there. And how do you cut through the competition to get your fair share of the dollars? Well, you do it by setting up a good, strong business. Second criteria is, do you conduct an individual annual appeal campaign? In other words, at least once a year, are you asking individuals to support your organization? As a funder, when you come to me and ask me for money, I'm going to want to know how many people support your organization. And if you're getting 90% of your money from foundations, I'm not so sure I want to fund you. Because if you look at the numbers totally in the United States, 83% of the money last year given to charity came from individuals. Foundations and corporations combined were 13%. So if you're getting all your money from foundations and corporations, that's risky money in any case, and we want to see you move ahead. We've done some other research where we looked at the top 40 organizations in the Chronicle list of the top 400 nonprofits, and the average individual percentage of individual giving as a percentage of their total funds raised was like 54%. We then went down to the bottom of that 400 list and looked at the bottom 40, and it was down to about 9%. So there's got to be a lesson there. If you want to grow and get big, you better focus on building your individual donor constituencies. How many individual donors have? Yes,
You say annual appeal campaign, and I know you're going to talk about that more later.
Jim is.
Jim is. But one of the questions is most of these organizations send out a monthly appeal. Is that different than an annual appeal? Or is
No,
that
I'd say it's
Not necessarily.
not necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's annual appeal is kind of a catch-all phrase.
But the big question I would ask is how many new donors are you adding to that list each year? And how much is the average gift increasing? Are you moving people up that donor pyramid? That's the critical question. Or are you just mailing to the same people and getting the same amount of money year after year after year?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
What if not every member of your board contributes financially?
It's the best answer I can give. The question was, what if not every member of your board contributes financially? First, and before I answer the question, I have to ask you something. Is your organization an organization that relies on business and foundation money?
No.
Then it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. But if you're getting grants and you're going to corporations for support, it's probably going to matter a lot because it's one of the things they use to cut the herd. An average corporation, Blue Cross and Blue Shield in North Carolina, for example, only takes grant requests from the state of North Carolina, and they average 300 a month. And they can only honor about 5 a month. So there's a huge amount of competition out there. But if your board isn't contributing, it's not going to hurt you in terms of the money you raise, but what it will hurt is in terms of the board participation and commitment to the organization. Because we know from experience that people who give are more committed than people who do not give. So,
Have you experience of working with boards where board members simply do not have the means to contribute?
everybody has a means to contribute something. And what we say, and we'll get into it a little bit later in this presentation, but let's deal with it now. What we say is every board member should make a substantial personal contribution to the organization. But substantial should be defined by the individual, him or herself, in terms of their own ability to give. And we know from research the poorest people in the nation, in terms of their ability to give more than the rich people do. The widows might. I mean, that's a reality. And so there's no reason in the world why anybody can't give something. I think 19% of the people on welfare give $76 a year to charity.
Are you talking about giving monetarily?
Yes, monetarily. Time doesn't count. As Jim will tell you, you can't take time down to the local convenience store and buy a soda. Doesn't work. Had a question here.
Just kind of a comment on that, Bill. I totally agree about 100%, and everyone can give. One strategy we've used at CGLA is when we meet with a potential donor, I actually, as executive director, I tell them what I give to the organization, and I let them know it hurts a little bit, and we expect the same out of every board member for it to be a sort of a comparable level of gift that pains. You know, there's some pain involved. But if they roll onto our board, they'll soon know my salary, and so they can do the math and figure out what I give and what my salary is, and maybe figure out a percentage accordingly.
Yep. So it is important. But every organization decides its own destiny and its own procedures. I think I already covered point 4 there, that what percentage comes from individuals. In the real world, the smaller the organization is, very typically the more money comes from foundations and corporations. May not be the case with your group here because of the nature of your business and how you're operating, but I would say drive to increase the number of donors on your roll net every year. In other words, look for a net increase of whatever the appropriate percentage is. Because if you're not growing, you're dying. Pure and simple. I don't know if you get government money for your programs. The average nationally is about 29% of total revenues come from government. Typically, the funding community wants to see 75% attendance or better at board meetings. What percentage of your board members serve on committees? Many of you may not even have committees at this point, given the size of your organizations. And if you don't, that's, it depends on the size you are. Most of them will want to know if you have a strategic plan and are you updating it. Does the board reflect the constituencies you serve? Jim mentioned that earlier, and the worst boards are all doctors, all pastors, all lawyers, all parents of kids with problems. Anything that is not diverse is usually not a great board. And then finally, is your financial base stable, declining, or in crisis? When you look at your financials, I would suggest that you pay most attention to one number in the financials, and that's your fund balance at the end of every month. Is it growing or is it shrinking? Your fund balance is shrinking. That means you need to make some adjustments. Keep it in balance. Fund balance, incidentally, if there's anybody in the room that doesn't know, are your net assets.